Let us now move on an ESG-focused presentation. We call it ESG+C, and we will find out shortly what it means from our exceptional guru speaker, Dr. Mark Mobius, received his PhD at MIT, Cambridge. He now heads up Mobius Capital Partners based in London. The firm has two investment funds, Mobius Investment Trust in London and Mobius Emerging Markets Fund in Luxembourg. Dr. Mobius has been investing in emerging markets since 1987 and managed the very first listed emerging markets fund on the New York Stock Exchange. He has received numerous awards, and he is also the author of a number of books, including The Inflation Myth and The Wonderful World of Deflation, The Little Book of Emerging Markets, and Invest for Good. Let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Mark Mobius.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Mobius of Mobius Capital Partners. Today, I'd like to give you some insight in how we treat ESG, environmental, social, governance standards, process, and case study. And also what we've done is we've added the C, which stands for culture. So it's really ESG+C. The next slide, first slide, shows you how ESG engagement in emerging markets companies improves earnings performance. And the interesting thing about this slide is that it shows how much emerging markets are influenced by the ESG engagement. In other words, companies that are engaged with ESG in emerging markets actually have better earnings performance than companies in North America, developed Europe, developed Asia, and developed total. So it's very, very important for us who are in emerging markets to focus on ESG. The next slide shows you how higher alpha in emerging markets takes place among the ESG leaders. This slide shows you the development between 2011 and 2020. This was a study done from Bloomberg and Capital IQ, showing you the total return of the leaders in emerging markets for ESG and the companies in Europe and Japan who are also ESG leaders. And you can see again that emerging market companies do much, much better than either the Europe or Japan companies. The next slide shows you a comparison of emerging markets ESG leaders and China ESG leaders. And it shows again that there's outperformance during the 2013 to 2019 period very clearly. Returns for emerging markets, MSCI emerging markets companies in general, were about 4.7%, whereas the emerging markets ESG leaders were 6.9%. In the case of China, it was 8.9% versus 13.6%. And you can also see that the maximum drawdown was less for the ESG leaders versus the regular companies for both emerging markets in general and China specifically. And of course, the Sharpe ratio was different for both. Again, better on the ESG leaders groups. The next slide gives you an insight in how we at Mobius Capital Partners look at ESG+C. And by the way, as I said, we've added the C because we found that culture internally in companies is very, very important. And we divide our work into two pillars. Pillar 1 is the fundamental stock selection, and Pillar 2 is actual engagement. So in other words, whenever we plan to buy a company, we first ask the company management if they are willing to engage with us in a cooperative basis to help improve their ESG+C factors. If they're not, then we don't invest. If they are interested, then we invest, provided, of course, all of the other characteristics are good. And then we start working with them. So you can see Pillar 1 involves idea generation, where we have a proprietary screen looking for good companies. Then we have initial research. Then we have a very deep dive, 360-degree due diligence framework with ESG+C factors. And then we construct our portfolio. Then, post-investment, we take active ownership. In other words, we feel and we act as active owners, even though we may be a minority shareholder and even though we may not be on the board, we still become very active in engaging with the management, and we're constantly reviewing our portfolio to make sure that the company is adhering to better and better ESG+C factors. The next slide shows you what we are talking about when we talk about culture. A culture, of course, shapes attitudes, behaviors, and defines what is encouraged in the company. And the factors include equality, freedom, recruitment, innovation, and remuneration. Equality covers things like, is there a big pay gap between different parts of the organization? Is there meritocracy? Is there transparency? In the case of freedom, is there some degree of autonomy among the workers? Are they allowed to do their work in their own creative way, while, of course, adhering to the general principles of the company? And is there a good work-life balance? Do workers feel they're being trusted to self-actualize in their work? Then on the recruitment side, we look carefully at the degree to which there's employee churn and how the companies are hiring people. The interview process is very important, and employee profiles is something we look at very carefully. Then when we talk about innovation, we talk about how the company encourages workers and staff to think outside the box, and they are encouraged to really come up with new ideas. And then remuneration, of course, is not only financial, but also non-financial. In other words, are there other things like long-term incentives? Are there benefits, non-financial benefits like home leave, et cetera, et cetera? And by the way, during this period of COVID, people working from home has, for some companies, worked out very, very well. Those people feel very free to use their own time frames to work and to do the jobs they have to do. So it's been a good learning experience for many companies. The next slide, unfortunately, shows you that despite the importance of culture and the engagement or actively engaged, disengaged of staff and companies worldwide, you can see that 85% of staff globally are not engaged or are actively disengaged. And this is based, by the way, on a Gallup survey done in 2017. It covered a wide scope of companies. And you can see, interestingly enough, the United States and Canada lead in terms of engagement with a 31% weighting. Unfortunately, the rest of 32% and 17%, or 52% and 17% rather, are either disengaged or actively disengaged. The lowest ranking is in East Asia with only a 6% engagement. But generally speaking, the scores are very poor. Interestingly enough, Latin America is pretty good, 27%. That may be because of the simpatico culture that we find among Latinos, but still it's a relatively low score with many other people not engaged at all or actively disengaged. So there is really a lot of work to be done. The next slide finally shows you how culture drives revenue growth and profitability. Obviously, if you have satisfied employees, you will have more successful companies and you will have satisfied customers. So you can track internal service quality, workplace design, job design, employee selection and development, employee rewards and recognition, tools for serving customers. All these things are very important for internal service quality. And that leads, of course, to employee satisfaction, employee retention, employee productivity improvement, and the external service value is obviously because it's obviously developed because service concepts results for customers that are going to be satisfied. And customer satisfaction, of course, once you have customer satisfaction, you have customer loyalty, and that leads to revenue growth and profitability. So I know a lot of people think, well, this kind of thinking seems to be very iffy. In other words, is there a direct relationship between this and a company that is very profitable and very successful? And our research indicates, and other research indicates, that in fact it's very, very important and leads to much better investments when we look at companies and help them with their culture development. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mark Mobius, for a successful presentation on ESG+C. I am sure a lot of investors and organizations will keep C as in culture as a key focus moving forward.